Hey guys, Bill the Appraiser here with a new episode of All About Appraisals. Topic of the day is design and appeal. Um, some people say that design tells the story and appeal sells the story. You know what I mean? You're driving down the road and you see this nice looking house and kind of catches your eye, whether it's the color, whether it's design. And of course, when I think about that, we're all probably thinking of something positive and not necessarily something negative, but it could be something negative. We've all seen that too. You drive down the road, you see a house, and you go, yikes, what's that about? What made them think that was a good idea? And we've all seen that. And, I'll get to a story about that here in a little bit. Um, Design, basically, all those sort of typical, designs that we think of when you think of home style designs. Ranch, bungalow, Cape Cod, Tudor, and there's many more. And actually, I have a link in the description to a poster called American Houses, and it's kind of interesting. Gives the history and gives you about 100 different designs. And so I'll probably mention that again later in the video, so I don't forget. So, but check that out if you feel like it. So design, and then appeal. Appeal is really, how does the market react to that? So again, back to design tells the story, appeal sells the story. And for all the ones that I just mentioned, those are kind of all classic and classical. And so, I don't think appraisers really make any distinction or adjustment between those different types. Some appraisers might talk about maybe they make an adjustment between single story and two story. I have not found that to be necessary in my market, but there may be markets where it is. But I think, appraisers basically look at all those kind of the same way. If it's a Cape Cod, if it's just some other type of two story, maybe it's 1.5 story, maybe it's a bungalow, maybe it's a Tudor. I think adjustments come into play a little more when you start talking about the difference between kind of a traditional design and a more contemporary design. It used to be years ago, before they started making changes to the way appraisals are done, that appraisers basically classified everything into two categories: traditional or contemporary. Maybe, a couple of other things, log and such, but it didn't really make any adjustments for anything outside that arena. If it was traditional, it was traditional and probably did not warrant an adjustment, except unless you're using a contemporary comp for some reason, in which case you might make a positive adjustment against a contemporary comp. Back to the rule of thumb for adjustments I've probably used before: comp worse, add; comp better, subtract. And so, with the contemporary design being felt to be inferior to the traditional design, and the market almost certainly reflecting that, then the appraiser might add money to that to compensate for it. But, in my neck of the woods, we have a little bit of everything. We also have a design called Foursquare, which is kind of an older home, but it's basically a box on a box type thing. But, a story I was going to tell you about is, in my neck of the woods, there's an interesting thing going on where there was a house, people had bought it, they rehabbed it, put it back on the market. And from what I could tell from the MLS photos, it looked great on the inside. But the outside, they had painted this kind of purplish color. And so, I'm not really sure. I'm sure they thought it was good color and it appealed to them. And maybe if they were going to stay, that's what they were going to paint it. Who knows? But so that house has sat on the market and sat on the market for quite a while now. Now, on the other hand, right next door, although granted across the street, a house went back up for sale because the second house had sold a couple of times in the last couple of years for various reasons. Someone passed away, I think one was a relocation. So there's nothing wrong with the house. It's a very traditional older home, probably built around the turn of the last century. And of course, either painted or vinyl sided, looks very nice, thoroughly updated, even down to the white picket fence. That house went back in the market, and it was on the market for less than a week and is under contract. And so again, right away, all about design and appeal. Even though the other house was okay, when you have this second house that went back on the market that apparently had much more market appeal, that you look at it and you say, wow, that's a nice house, let me look at that. So, in the whole arena of design and appeal, you've got all sorts of things going on. And some of those things might be regional. There may be certain homes, maybe in the southern part of the country, particularly Southwest out there, maybe California, where you might have certain home styles that, you wouldn't really see a whole lot around here. You know, same thing, you know, you have homes that we have here in the South that, you know, you may not have up north, you may not have out west. So just definitely something to keep an eye on. I was going to check my notes right quick, so please forgive me. But I've written several things down. And so I just wanted to, looking here, said design appeal may be subjective, but in the appraisal world, their influence shows up in how buyers behave, and that is what drives value. So absolutely. But yeah, I would love for you to make comments, you know, put something in the description. If there's certain home styles that you prefer, certain home styles that you think maybe are not quite as desirable. I'm trying to think of some other examples here right quick that I've probably used this example before, but here, a few miles away from where I live, you had a street that was basically very, very traditional homes. And then someone went in a couple of years ago and built this Game of Thrones type castle. And so, although it was definitely a high-end home, you know, and was, I don't know what it cost to build, several $100,000 at least. I think it has since sold twice. Once I think 800 something, and the next time right around $1 million. So not an inexpensive home, but just very out of place. By the same token, it does continue to sell as far as I can tell. But, you know, again, even things that have limited appeal will actually ultimately sell to someone. Everybody's heard of Zillow. There's an offshoot of Zillow called Zillow Gone Wild. And so you'll see these homes that, I don't know, maybe it looks like a spaceship. You know, maybe it looks like a cheeseburger, you know, or a mushroom or a shark. And so, yeah, those homes are out there, but super limited appeal. And then, you know, I won't say all but impossible to appraise, but there are some homes out there that fall into the category of, you know, whatever someone is willing to pay for it, obviously. And so it may not be what the buyer wants for it, what the seller wants for it, and it may not really be what the buyer wants willing to pay, you know, but it's just what the market will bear, and it may take longer to sell an atypical home, you know, something that has less design appeal that would to sell a typical home, more of a traditional type thing. And lenders look at that, and that's why I think if there's an atypical type design, then very often, you know, lenders, what they would really love to see, regardless of the design, as far as the appraisal goes, lenders would like to see at least one comp, if not more, that has that same design and appeal. You know, even if it's something, I mean, if you have ranch homes, I don't think a lender is going to make a whole lot of distinction between whether it's ranch or whether you're calling it craftsman or whether you're calling it bungalow, etc. You know, they may take a look and see if you've got other single-story homes. Same thing if you start with a two-story listing, a two-story subject, then the lender's probably going to want to see at least a couple of two-story comps as well. I think about a log home. The industry, by and large, seems to think that log homes are atypical, and I would agree with that. There aren't that many log homes out there. But the industry, by my way of thinking, can't really seem to decide if they think that the log home is inferior or superior to the average traditional home. Because I see a lot of log homes that sell for quite a bit. Of course, in our area, a lot of log homes are potentially on acreage as well. And a lot of log homes are beautiful. And typically in the log homes are maybe a bit more in rural areas, very often on acreage for people that like that country feel. So again, kind of interesting topic, design and appeal. Feel free to put your thoughts in. Again, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button. Check out the poster and the comments. Anything there you haven't seen that you think is particularly atypical you want to talk about, or if you've seen one, let me know, and we'll talk about some other things on the next video. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.